now you
Nice.
can start over.
Okay, cool. So yeah, like, is everyone here aware of what an AI agent is? So
Yep,
just a short
somewhat.
description, a very concise definition would be an LLM that has access to tools. And these tools basically allows the LLM to take actions on your behalf. So that's when, an LLM or a chat workflow becomes an agent and it's able to decide what tool to use. So these are like the two defining features of what makes an agent. Now, before we dive into Cursor itself, I just want to go down a little bit of theory around something incredible that came out, that Anthropic came out with. I think it's been a month or two since then. It's called MCP, or Model Context Protocol. You can think of it as an abstraction layer that allows any LLM to use any API or function or whatever you create. So think about it this way. You have REST APIs that let you execute functions through another service, right? What MCP does is it creates an abstraction around that. So now you don't have to program in an API integration. You can just give it a one-liner bit of code and be like, here, use it. And it will know, and depending on how it's developed, it will know how to use basically all the tools you give it. Now, this is important because this is basically the major change that propelled AI tooling forward even more. And I think we're at a very exponential growth rate right now. So I just want to start off by the tooling that I use for this. Let me just give you the scenario here. Um, our client required a mobile app be built. Timeline was very short. We initially outsourced it to someone, but they weren't being able to meet the deadline. So I had effectively 48 hours to meet that deadline. And so what we had with us was basically a Figma design and and just basically a PRD, right? Now I'm going to walk you through like how to do this thing from scratch, but let's start with the Figma design. Let me see if I can share my screen here. Right. You guys can see my screen, right?
Yes, we can.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to introduce you to a couple of tooling here. This isn't like an entirely cursor workflow, but this is something that let's just do this. Yeah, and I'm like, okay, you know what? Let's just ignore that for now, and let's see if we can go with this. Okay, yeah, okay, perfect. So this is basically the Figma design file we had, right? What I initially did to turn this into code was you install this plugin called builder.io. And the reason I did that is because builder.io had did an integration with a different AI tooling company. And that integration is basically what made this workflow possible. So let's say, for example, the login screen. I go here, I go to plugins, and then I hit builder.io. And what I'm guessing it does behind the scenes is it's able to basically analyze all the design components and then turn it into a rough mock-up of like a React code, React component. And then once that's done, it tries to implement that React component code. Okay, so it's not perfect, but this seems like it's the closest to what I wanted. All right. Now what's cool is once this export is done, you can click this button, open in Lovable. And I'm just going to cancel this because I want to show you an existing Lovable design. But what Lovable is essentially, it used to be called GPT Engineer. And this is also an incredible tool because it essentially lets you, this is for you business guys out there. This is like you from text to app. And I'm not just saying text to app as in like you have to do the rest of it. It's text to app, and then you can integrate a backend in this as well, which I'll show. But yeah, so let's try and go to the home screen. So what I did once I hit that open in Lovable button, it takes like a few minutes, but it essentially turns this Figma design into code that you can edit. Sec, that you can edit on Lovable. So let's give that a second to load up. Does anyone have any questions so far?
Is Lovable like an independent program from Figma?
No, no, it's completely like the apps that are, and what's interesting is the apps that I'm about to show you. These are mostly like companies that came out in the GPT era.
Hmm.
You know, these companies didn't exist before, and it was because of AI that they were able to. Like for example, Cursor is the fastest application to hit 100 million ARR in like a month, which is
Yeah,
insane.
yeah.
Um, yeah, so it's an independent app.
Okay.
I liked so Cursor right now might be more capable where I didn't have to use Lovable, but at the time, and this was like 2, 3 weeks ago, at the time, no, I've tried a bunch of different applications. None of them are able to actually translate Figma as well as Lovable can, like on React. So what you see happen here is like the screens here, and then I have a few, like I have feedback, I have changes that I want to make. It's not much, but let's say for example, I can take a screenshot of the Figma design, and then like just give it instructions, and then it uses those instructions and basically write the code for you. Like you can check over here. Uh, the it basically writes an entire React application for you, which is insane. This is like what 5, 10 minutes of work, and then yeah, like I just give it some more instructions, and it's not much, but I got it to this point where I'm like, okay, this is something that I can use now, right? Um, so the problem with this workflow was that Lovable creates a different application for every screen. So let's say sign in, I'd have to like export design, blah blah blah, and then it creates a separate application. So if you like, let's just go to dashboard. Right. So as you can see, I had to create a different application for each of these screens. And then I was like, okay, but I want a singular app, right? From all of this. That's when I decided to bring in Cursor. Now, after let's say I'm done, okay, this screen looks nice. What I do is I just go over, I believe there's a settings screen, or maybe they changed it. So there used to be a button here for settings. I guess they've changed the interface, but basically what you can do is integrate it with a GitHub repository. So then it basically initializes a Git repository on your on your profile. So let me just see if I can show you. Yeah, laundry home screen. So yeah, and then you can see if you look at the commits, it's just a lot of lovable. Just with every change that you make, it is now pushing those commits to your repository. So you have code like SVC done from the get go. All right, now the interesting thing is I have, let's say I've done this, I've replicated this for every stream, for literally every stream in the program, in the design. I've done this, I've replicated it, and each design has its own GitHub repository. So then what I did was I went to Cursor. Can you see my Cursor screen? Like, do you see it?
Yeah, we can see that.
All
Yes.
right, awesome. Okay, so in Cursor, now what I started doing is I asked it to bootstrap an Expo app. All right, and with Cursor, the fun thing is you can go to settings, Cursor settings, and then go to features. And over here, you can actually add documentation. So, for example, like this already has Expo built in, but let's say, for example, I wanted to use this library called React Native Reusables, which is basically like so Lovable actually used the ShadCN design system to build this out for me. So it uses Tailwind CSS, ShadCN to build out these components. So I found that okay, React Native Reusables is a library, similar library for React Native. So then I just clicked on add new doc and then I type in the URL and it basically scrapes the URL and creates like vector embeddings for it. And now you have immediate access to these docs. So for example, I can now go here. Let's say I want to use GSAP. So I could go, okay, reference the GSAP documentation and then, ask it to do a scroll trigger animation or something. So this, like, you can see how this workflow, like, you don't necessarily need to be an expert in a specific library. You can just bring the docs over and then reference them in context. And it's able to find, which pages are the most relevant and then do that. But yeah, so that's just a feature that I use. Um, so once I asked it to bootstrap, I was like, okay, this cursor works best when, like, you only open a singular stack in the workspace. So this is only the Expo app front end. If I had the back end, that would be a separate workspace. I'd open a separate window. This gives it better access to the context here. And the other thing that it needs is cursor rules. And cursor rules is basically a file that's kind of like an LLM system prompt. It tells it how to act, how to do, whatever. And this is like, you guys can bookmark this. So what I use for basically cursor rules is this site called cursor.directory. And then over here, you can basically, let's say I wanted React Native, right? So I can search up React Native, and I can see that someone has already created this. So then I can just copy paste this into my .cursor rules file. What you have to understand about the .cursor rules is this cursor directory, it gives you a base to start from, but you kind of want to be building these rules over time. So what I did was I actually wrote a section on component mapping. So the reason being, my use case is a little different. I already have the React code base and I want to turn it into React Native. So then I just used the chat here to add more content. Like I found out, okay, if I wanted to use Tailwind in React Native, what would I do? I found the native wind library. So I had to do some research first, find out like the mapping of it, and then basically build out this cursor rules document. So far, any questions?
No, already got to know about cursor rules. I use cursor, but didn't know about this one.
Yeah, it's really cool, and I'll keep going. There's a lot more to it. Mm.
Okay,
See,
I have
and
one question.
yeah,
The
yeah, go ahead.
documentation you gave it in the links, so
Mhm.
does it go through all the pages in that link or just that specific page?
No, so you give it the documentation base URL, and
Hmm.
it does a recursive search through
Okay,
everything.
okay, got it.
Yeah, and then sometimes, if it's like if you think that it's missing that context, you can actually just let's say go
Like
to.
sometimes do they lose context? Because I've seen GPT lose context for a lot of times.
So what's interesting about this is Cursor will actually tell you when you're close to context limit, and there'll be a
Okay.
pop-up over here that says continue to the next chat, and it'll summarize your existing chat and then start a new chat with a brand new context window.
Oh,
Okay.
So cool thing is, let's say I copy this URL, right? And let's say I feel like maybe the existing documentation it has it's not specific enough. So I can just go at and then add the link. And then it does the same thing. It turns its link into vector embeddings that you can basically, reference. So that's also great. I prefer to have my framework documentation in Cursor rules. Like basically the framework documentation goes to cursor settings and then in this section. But if I'm referencing, let's say, specific libraries, I prefer to use the specific links. So I'll be like, oh, go through these links. This is where the instructions are. Um, right. So the other thing, very important with working with cursor, is that you have to treat it like a junior software engineer. Like it's not like yes, you can pretty much put it in thinking mode, right? And then this turns on a reasoning model, and then you can have it do everything for you. But I feel like that creates more problems than it solves. Like I'm gonna walk you through my process of it. Uh, but the cool thing about this is that you have the option to choose which models you want to work with. And Claude, so I was using Claude 3.5 Sonnet when I started this workflow, and then in between, and It was taking me about an hour to convert each of these screens, each of these React apps into a screen for this Expo app. But once Cloud 3.7 Sonnet came out, like the 3.7 version, it just blew through everything, and my 1 hour was reduced to 15 minutes. It's absolutely insane. But okay, so what I would do here is I started writing screen conversion rules. So do you guys follow Git flow? Like, do you guys use feature branches, and is that like normal in your practice?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
So we do feature branches, we release on a tag.
Great, great, like perfect linear flow, of course, that should play as much as I'd expect from you. So let's say, for example, I'm working on a new feature branch. So like the way I'd start is I'd create a new feature branch. This one, it's to integrate the Google address picker. Um, so what I'd start by doing is I'd go like using a GitHub tool. Okay, now here's, remember at the beginning of the talk, I talked about MCP. So over here, you can actually add tooling. You can give Cursor already has built-in tools, like for example, reading files, going through documentation. It already has access to those. But then you can increase it. You can give it more limbs, so to speak. So, for example, a site that I use is let's see, smithery.ai. So it has all these MCP servers. And MCP servers are basically just, abstracted away tools. So you can give it access to anything. You could give it access to, for example, the Perplexity Search API or DuckDuckGo. What I did was, and I haven't experimented much with Cursor yet. And this excites me, and I'm working on some stuff. But so far, for this use case, I use the GitHub MCP server. So what that gives me the ability to do is I can basically use the GitHub API to interact with my repository. So now you can see where this is coming together. Where in this rule, I basically told it using the GitHub tool, which it already has access to. I told it to go to this repository, analyze the components and the final stream that needs to be built, compare it against the current code base to ensure that code is reused as efficiently as possible. And basically, what I have it do, like if you think about what I'm asking it to do, is go to this GitHub repository, analyze the entire code base, come back, check out current code base, and then let's talk about how we're going to convert this, screen, this React screen, into React Native code. And the first thing that I ask it to do is let's make a plan first, because this is very important. Again, you want to give the AI step-by-step information. The more you break it down, the better it'll work. So for this, let's say I created this thing. And what it does, again, is it lists the important information, finds out what the key components are, and then it does a phase-by-phase basically setup of like, it basically breaks its tasks down into very small parts, into each component, right? And then what I have it do is, and this is also important, is I asked it to make it so that I can check things off as they're done. So now, once the plan is made, I'll just go here and then like reference the file. And by the way, you can reference any file. You can basically even reference your command line over here. Add to chat. It adds the lines from the command line, like context. And that's the beautiful thing about Cursor is it's so easy and simple to add context. All right. So once I'm done with the plan, what I do is, okay, let's start phase one. And then, I ask it, okay, as soon as you're done with it, like mark it off. And so what I then do is, as soon as it's done with each phase, I go and test that code. I test it manually first and then have it write unit tests later. But basically, that's what I'm doing. Because if you're like, oh, finish this entire plan, you don't know where it's going to mess up. So after it's done with each phase, I test it. If it looks good, if it doesn't, I make edits through chat, and I can actually show you. Let's see if I can. So, oh, by the way, all your chats are actually stored, right? So this was me trying to get it to do a Stripe integration, and I gave it access to the Stripe documents. I told it the user journey. So here's the interesting thing: when I'm making the plan, I actually put it in thinking mode. and give it, all as the more context you give it, the better, right? So I'm telling it which screens to update. Because this was a little more complex. This task was a little more complex, but you know, um, as an engineer, I feel like if you are planning ahead, that's the best way to go about developing a feature is you plan out the technical implementation first. So if you have that written down somewhere and then just give it those instructions, and yeah, it just zooms through it like and does everything you need it to do. I think this is a good point to pause and take any questions if you have any.
Okay, I had another question. You said you put it in thinking mode when you were making the plan, right? So after the plan, can you like put it out of thinking mode and then continue with the same plan it had made?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's the beauty of Cursor is that so Cursor right now has an auto mode that's like a new update where they choose the best model based on what your needs are. But this is again this is an update that came out recently. But yeah, you can put it in and out of thinking mode. And what's important here to note is that Cursor gives you these limitations. So, for example, they have 500 credits on their $20 plan.
Hmm.
Now, each credit is basically going to so up to I believe 25 tool usages is one credit. But if you use a thinking mode, it uses two credits instead of one.
Oh.
So that is a consideration. But I will say though, to basically build through this entire app screen to screen took me about 130 credits. That's I think there's 14 screens here, so 130 credits around that. It's I think the usage is great. I was actually able to build out 3 to 4 more production grade applications, and I'm still not nearing my credit limit. So I think that's great. It also depends on how you're using it. Like I would say batch your actions.
Hmm.
You know, like after 3.7 came out, instead of doing a single phases, I started doing like do 3 phases at once. So, that batch out your actions so that way you use less credit. So, you get used to it. And a lot of the things that I'm showing you here is an amalgamation of, YouTube, Twitter, and just my own experimentation.
Yeah.
What's important again here is that you keep on top of it. You have to move as quick as the industry is moving because it's changing so fast. Yeah. Anyone else?
I will
No,
have
I think
questions, but towards the end, I would like more for the non-technical folks, but
Sure, sure, sure.
we'll ask towards the end.
I
Still
was
thing.
also discussing with the team internally that like we need to pick the right model for the right job, right? If you're like using a very advanced model just to check few lines of code, it's not really the best use of your credits.
Hmm.
So, for example, we are using Windsurf, and I use it in their base model most of the time, which is free, right? It's like
Yeah.
thinking and verifying that whether this is fine or not. But when we need something serious, then invoke the other models.
Yeah, like I think it's important to look at it as a pair programmer instead of like at the end of the day, again, and I've tried to do this where I try to shut my own brain down and just let AI do everything. Do not. In 2 to 3 hours, I lost all my debugging skills. I couldn't solve simple problems. So do not do that. After it's done with each phase, make sure you thoroughly review the code. If you do not understand it, question it. Put it in chat mode. You don't need to put it in agent mode. What's also cool is you'll see that cursors has the ability to execute command line, commands on the command line. So you basically have to ensure that that you're approving everything that happens. You're aware of what's happening because it's very, very easy to just get lost in it and just have it do everything. But remember, you're an engineer for a reason. The future of engineering, I believe, is senior engineers orchestrating these agents, so to speak. Um, where again, the technical implementation and the planning should come from you. And even if it doesn't, brainstorm with it to figure out how it should be implemented. But at the end of the day, you are the one giving it like instructions and directions. Okay. Let's try to move on and see if I have. Okay, so basically, a lot of the times, I have it keep track of everything I'm doing, like in Markdown files. It's just important for documentation. And like here obviously make sure you're committing regularly so that you get you're able to roll back whenever. You can actually use cursor to roll back. They have a rollback feature, but I don't trust it as much because sometimes you're doing command line edits and it's able to roll back the files but not necessarily things outside of Git's purview. So that has created some issues for us before. Let's see, what else could I walk you guys through. Um, Honestly, the other thing that I would say, and I haven't been doing this lately because I'm working on something myself, but explore the MCP servers that are available. So it's not just on Smithery, it's also on Cursor Directory. So for example, a great MCP is Supabase. So once you basically set this up, your cursor would be now able to communicate with Supabase. So use the API. So that could mean things like you have it plan out the data schema, and then you have it write down a markdown file for it, and then you reference that markdown file, and then you ask it to create that table and everything on Supabase for you. Where you don't have to manually do it, or you can even ask it to write scripts that will do this for you. Like honestly, I feel like if you use this right, its engineers have truly been unleashed. That's how I've been feeling like. And what I would say also just stay on top of all the tooling that's available. Like I showed you here, it's Lovable and Cursor, but Cursor on its own, especially with 2.7, has gotten really powerful. So, for example, a lot of the times, even after I'm getting the React source code from Lovable, it's still not perfect, right? So let me see if I can show. Oh, this is a while back. Okay, so this was interesting. This was me. Okay, I got really pissed over here. Like sometimes you will lose patience with it because if like the longer your context gets. But it's important to ask it to search through the code base. Like sometimes you have to specify that. Like if your chat history is getting too long, it'll forget to look at the right files. So you kind of have to remind it that, hey, remember to look at these files. Um, so you can see over here, it's basically going through all the necessary files that it needs. And then it basically helped me make the API integrations. And it was so simple. All I did was I have the API set up. I go to Postman, and then let's say I grab the response format, and I was like, hey, I want to use this API to do this action. Here's a response format. Like, can you write an API service adapter for me to get this set up? And it's able to do that. Like, yeah, like this is, and it uses, and I instructed it to use JustStand as well for state management, and it does it actually beautifully. Again, like make sure that you are obviously keeping track of what the changes in your code base. But initially, you might find it, speeding you up by 1.5x, 2x, but the more you use it, the faster you'll get at it. You'll learn how to interface with it properly. Um, I would say don't be afraid to go out and explore and see how other people are doing it. They're usually great case studies to start from. So yeah, I think that with Cursor, that is like I've built a lot of other cool stuff. But yeah, see. So so far, what do you guys have anything else that you want me to dive into, or should I get to the questions that you have for me that you have for
I
me?
had a question surrounding Figma designs. So you started from translating the design to a front-end code, but the step before, which is the designing part, are there tools out there, you could prompt and it will just show up stuff
Yeah,
in Figma,
yeah, yeah.
tools like that?
So Builder.io, the tool that I use to translate the design, that and Localfi. So localfi.ai, we actually use this to deploy a site to production, like just from like prompting it. These two tools, they're great for it. And what's really cool about Localfi, I'm not sure if Builder.io does this, but with Localfi, you could attach a design system to it. So you could give it access to a design system and then use that design system. Like Localfi under the hood, they're building a model, they're calling it the large design model, like everyone the marketing terms or whatever, but they've trained it on a lot of different design systems. So that's cool. And then you can even attach your own UI library. If you have like a custom library of components, you can even attach that and it's able to reference those components and then build out your designs for you. So that's cool. But again, all of this is experimental and then moving really, really fast. So you'd have to obviously keep that in mind.
Is
Actually,
there any
Siam,
way we can kind
you
of,
would be. Sorry,
hello?
say, go ahead.
Yeah, is there any way we can, use AI to kind of audit the existing UIs that we have built out? Sometimes there are so many inconsistencies within human errors, we have human errors. So is there any tool for that that we can see, okay, this is inconsistent?
So again, cursor is great for that, and I was actually
Oh,
going to mention that I forgot, lost
mm,
track. But basically, sometimes when I would see that my final build is not similar to my Figma design, what I'll do is I'll take a screenshot of my Figma design and put it in cursor context because these are multimodal models, right? And then you're able to basically tell, okay, and then you basically give it two screenshots, one from your built app and one from your Figma design, and be like, hey, find the inconsistencies here, think about what changes we have to make, and then fix it. And then it does that really well, especially with the new Cloud 3.7 model. It does that really, really well.
So I had a question like when you export like any design from Figma to like and build it as an MVP, that's a different thing. But when you like look for small gradients here and there and small pixels, maybe you set up with ShatCN, but how do you like compare that it's pixel perfect and ready for deployment even with the help of AI?
So here, if I were you, I would develop a workflow for it, like maybe a pipeline where as soon as your design is done or your development's done, it triggers a design review, right? And it's able to, because again, it's not when you're using these screenshots of images, it's not comparing the code, it's comparing visual output, right? These are multimodal models, so they're able to understand it's able to understand these gradients. In fact, I was actually able to apply a gradient to my application through just this alone, where it first gave me like a very solid color, and I was like, hey, this does not look like this. So it was able to apply a gradient. So again, the limits of it are obviously still under testing. Like how far can it truly go? But understand that this is the worst it'll ever be. Like this is the worst it'll be moving forward, right? So that's exciting. I think.
Yes.
Okay, so did you guys want to move on to the questions that you sent me?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, I should also like while I'm getting through this, I've also built a lot of complex applications. In fact, I was showing Simon this. I was building this knowledge graph based application using this exact workflow. And it's something and it's a full on machine learning ingesting pipeline with like data visualization and a RAG application on top. And I was able to do this in about 3 days. And so that's what I'm saying. Like the speed at which you can move is insane. There's no more barriers to entry, I believe. And even for the idea guy, the business people, it's you can go on Lovable and then actually before I get into the question, I'll just show you one last thing. And this was for me prepping for a software engineer interview that I had. Um, I basically went on Lovable and I was like, I created a plan to basically to study for algorithm, system design, whatever. And then using that plan, I was like, okay, I have a PDF Markdown file. Um, let me just. So I had a Markdown file, and I basically asked it to turn it into an interactive web app. It did that incredibly well. I think because it's spinning out. But yeah, you're able to what I'm saying is no matter how like if you're like, okay, a simple app can solve a daily problem I'm having, you can use these tools to build it out. You don't have to wait on anyone. This one was something I did in less than like 6 to 8 hours. It's taking a while to load. Oh well, I'll send you guys a link once the demo problems are over. But yeah, well, basically the point being that you can build really quick, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a full-blown app like an MVP. Like you can imagine getting to MVP super quick here. Okay, so which AI tools do I prefer for speeding up web dev? I think I've already answered that. Can I ask what your current cloud infrastructure is? Like AWS or what are you guys using?
Yeah, AWS, mainly AWS.
Okay. My advice on CI/CD is probably not going to be useful to you guys because I was like, you remember how much I hate use open source and like
Yeah,
bare
yeah,
metal. So it didn't seem useful to go into AWS for the place where I'm at right now, which is they have this very small, like, website plans. It's not anything major. So I use this. Have you guys heard of Coolify? Okay, you're gonna really enjoy this. This is where how I actually manage all my cloud instances. Yeah. Okay, so what's really cool about Coolify is think of it as an abstraction layer over your EC2 instances or anything. You're basically able to add servers to it. Like you just give it a name, like the IP address, the domain, and it basically goes ahead and installs Docker and Docker Compose and everything necessary over there. You can even set it up as a Docker Swarm manager. And then what it allows you to do is basically manage a fleet of servers, and it uses Scadi to handle reverse proxy. And so then I can just, let's say if I wanted to deploy an application, I can just go to project. So let's not go there, let's go to experiments. And then let's say, oops.
So is this like a combination of like what Ansible and Terraform with a better UI?
Pretty much, it's I'm not sure what it uses on the back end, but essentially what you're saying, yeah. And its main driver is basically okay. Yeah, this is what I want to show you. So you can basically go to the best way that people have been describing this is open source Vercel. I think that's like the way people have been describing it. So you can actually go and it'll help you set up a GitHub app as well. So you can deploy repositories, and it's super simple. Or then you have like pre-built Docker Compose stacks that you can just deploy. And so this was like to deploy Postgres databases or even Supabase instances. It's just one click, and like you can also let me just actually show you something that I did for. And this was, I believe, a Docker deployment. So basically, you're able to give it a Docker Compose file and it's able to deploy, and then you can have it set up Discord notifications, and yeah. So and the coolest part about this is you can set up preview deployments, right? And you can have preview deployments set up to certain branches. So, for example, the workflow that we have is that one of my junior engineers is gonna like I'm gonna ask for a feature, then he's gonna write that feature, and then basically submit a PR. And as soon as he submits that PR, it goes up on a preview domain. And then I test that preview domain, I test that PR. Once I merge it in, it gets merged into dev, and then from dev to main into production. So this is what I basically use for my CI/CD, and it's super simple. It's super abstract. There's not much coding involved in terms of managing it, but it's very makes everything very simple. Let's see. For fast, okay, so it asks me what three must-have skills do I have for fast development? Get out of the planning phase and start building. Like, I understand, like, you're like, okay, it has to have this feature, it has to have that feature, and I've experienced it myself. The more experience I'm gaining, the more I'm like, okay, no, I have to think about this vertical, I have to think about this and that. I think the best way to get into it is just dive in deep because it's so simple to describe your application to like a GPT and then be like, this is the feature I want to implement. This is what I already have. Create a plan for me. And if you're doing it from inside Cursor, then it has access to your code base. It understands context into how you've already built everything. That's able to use that information to build you. Like what I would do if I were you is like maybe make a PRD for every feature coming in. Like every feature, just make a plan. Like have it make a plan, brainstorm it, see if the plan makes sense, and then just have it execute. You will speed up so fast. Like it's insane. And you get this rush from having like because we're so used to building out features and then sometimes you get tired, you're like, when am I going to finish building this? And then you miss a sprint. But if you're able to see constant dopamine hits from your features going live, or even getting to a point where you're like, okay, I can take over from AI, So I think that also will motivate you to keep going at it faster and faster. Um, do you guys do like internal indie days, like where you're just like building dumb stuff on your own? I think like that would be really cool to do. Like just once a month, maybe sit down and hack out a dumb idea that you have, and you have the speed to do it now. So and never can share the learnings about it. I think that would be a great way to go about it. Let's see.
So a lot of startup I've seen, they make small teams and they give them a problem, and just they do 2 day hackathon and just come up with a with a solution like really fast. I think we don't have that yet, but Rashid, we can definitely try it out and you know pit people against each other and see how they perform.
You know, like you could actually keep going faster than this. Like for example, I use a terminal, like my command line. I'm using something called Warp. It's called warp.dev. You can just go look it up. I don't necessarily have to know like what is my IP address, what's the command for it. I just ask it, what is my IP address? And then it's even better because when you're SSHing into other servers, you have the capabilities to do that over there. So that's cool. Obviously security issues and whatnot, that's it. But when you're at this cutting edge. Um, the so here basically and it's important I think in your cursor rules to define architectural patterns like if you're giving a documentation that has an ideal code based pattern that also works, but if you're giving it that like if you're um, asking it to work on an existing code base, it helps to document, like summarize your code base for your for your cursor agent to read. So that would look like go through the code base, find all the relevant files, create like a document tree, and then basically reference where everything is, like create an index for your documents for your code base. Cursor does that automatically, but just to give it better context, if there's more complex components to your application, I think that would help. Okay, Simon, did you want to go into the business stuff? Because I think, yeah, probably good from my end.
Yeah, so I'm trying to grow this culture of basically empowering the business team to build tools on their own. So if it's a repetitive task, they should be able to, build something on there. So just from a purely no code perspective, let me give you a use case. Let's say writing social media content, right? So you need to come up with copies, you need to come up with static posts or dynamic videos, whatever, and then you have to schedule it, post it, and then there's a workflow to it.
Mhm.
What sort of tools would you recommend the non-technical folks to, just I understand there are different tools for different use cases, but what are some of the general ones that we can use?
So for business folks, it would make the most sense to use like you have I think three major options here. You have make.com, you have Zapier, and then you have N8N. Now, personally, I prefer N8N because they're moving really fast and they were basically an automation platform before the GPT era. And a lot of their stuff is open source. So if you were like, okay, I can pay up to a certain amount for tasks and like for task credit, automation credit, but then you're like, okay, but I'm scaling too fast. You can just host the open source version on your servers, right? And then basically run those automations. There's some limitation between the community and the enterprise, but you can limit. There's like pros and cons, and it gives you more flexibility in that regard. And what they've also done is they've like included co-pilots in those applications. So instead of just like having to drag and drop build these workflows, you can just describe to it what you want, right? And because of N8N's great documentation, you could also take that documentation, plug it into like GPT or whatever, and then be like, hey, like what are the things I can do, or how do I go about doing this using N8N? So I think that gives you a lot of flexibility and basically more than enough to get your business team going on automation.
Is there any resource you would recommend, like, or you just, learning on the go? We could just, you find it on YouTube or some course. Like, what resource would you recommend?
Honestly, all my information is from YouTube. Like it is just YouTube, it is Twitter, it is TikTok. I follow a bunch of these creators, and they're very good at keeping things like bringing things up to date. Honestly, if you just go search up anything tutorials, and then you know, like especially now, I feel like there's like a huge surge of content
Yeah.
out there, and you don't really have any lack of resources. Like I'm not going through any professional like course or whatever. I'm just following these particular YouTubers that pop up on my home screen, like and just following what they're doing.
But I think for courses, like Google has a great course on prompt engineering. It's free.
Mm.
Uh, so what that one does, I think it's around 6 hours or something. But the idea is to be like introduced to how to give AI more context, right?
Mhm.
Because often
Right,
what we do is like one shot, like zero shot context. We don't give it anything and tell it that hey, give me five
yeah,
marketing idea or give me five something, right?
right,
So if you start with more context and go about that, like set up the GPT so that it knows what you are expecting it to do, and then give it more context, reiterate. I think that's the other thing that Ehfaz was saying, that when he was saying that treat it more like a junior developer, treat it like an intern who doesn't know anything,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So you have to chat a lot more with the AI to sort of get the result that you want to get. But I think Google's course is a good one, like to at least
Yeah.
get introduced into the mindset that how do we interact with any AI tools.
Yeah, absolutely. Google's a great resource, but also the one I actually took, like, thank you for bringing it up because I completely forgot. DeepLearning.ai. They have these very, like, all these free courses, and they have partnerships with OpenAI. So they actually have engineers from OpenAI come in and talk about how to, like, most effectively prompt these things, right? And Anthropic's blog, very important. There's like they have, and Google released a video on how to build agents. Anthropic released a video on how to build agents. In fact, a really useful thing that I could say that you guys could start by using is if you can create an MCP server around your existing knowledge base of documents at Airwork, right? So like all the documents that you have, plug it in somewhere, build, and you can look up the documentation for MC. But if you just build that layer, and then now any AI application would be able to access that information specific to your company. So now you're AI tool agnostic. You can use whatever AI tool you want, just plug in that MCP server and it has information, automatic information access to your documentation. So I'd say that's one really cool use case that you guys could, pursue if you want to build along these lines.
That would be lovely. Having like all the call transcripts, having Notion, Google Drive, everything in one place.
And
Using
then you can experiment with multiple AI tools. Like you're not locked into one provider. So I think that's the beauty of MCP. And then there's just a lot more. I guess, just read about it. Anthropic's blog on it is brilliant. Like all the engineers here, you have to go through it. Yeah. Let's see. I don't. So there's just a lot of content, a lot of things to cover. Obviously, there's things that I learned along the way. What I just recommend is hack your algorithms. Like that's what I've done. Hack all your social media algorithms. Is like if you know that you're spending over 3 seconds on a piece of content, your algorithm will think that that's what you like. So use that knowledge. Hack all your algorithm. Like if I just go to my YouTube homepage right now, I can just like show you. It's just all of it is just massive information dump. Like oops. Like look at this. This is an agent, and it's just a lot of just hack your algorithms basically. And then maybe if you're not ready to watch it, just put them over here. I don't know. I haven't watched a lot of this stuff, but you guys can check out this guy, AI Jason. He's who I follow the most in terms of like this guy's always ahead of the curve and has very solid replicable workflows that gets you up to speed on everything. So yeah, I think that's about all I could, extract from my learnings over the months. Hopefully, this was an informational session.
But
Do you guys have any
because
questions?
I have, I think before Renan jumps in. So
Yeah.
let's say you like we work in a team, right? There's a backend that goes with the front end. Front end have multiple people. And then the example that you showed is mainly focused on like you working solo, right? Or maybe
Mhm.
having at least like few amounts of contributors there.
Yeah.
How do you think like what would be our sort of approach to like adjusting these in a more team centric way?
Um, Honestly, like for example, Cursor does have this enterprise plan which lets you share your conversations with the code base, but I haven't used it, so I can't speak to that. But what I would do, and this is something that was kind of drilled into me through my years of touring, most of them were like have very small concentric PRs, which just one engineer can execute. Like your PR should not be a collection of features, but rather just it has one purpose. Make small, like basically your PR should be like they have a word for it, but it's one, a single purpose, right? So what that lets you do is you distribute the workload amongst your engineers, and then they just keep on, tackling like basically knocking those out. I think that way you'd be able to move really fast and also like ensure there's sync in your company. And we would have basically, I assume that you guys do fast hierarchical PR reviews. Is that like what you guys follow, or do all the pull requests go to one person? Um, how does that work? How does the code review process work?
So usually we raise the PR. There is a sort of gate so that at least 2% reviews the PR. But what often ends up happening is I have to override, like like refuse the review and push it, right? So
Right.
it's difficult in that regard that like we'll have to wait for someone to do exactly the review. But I've also seen that Windsurf has also come up with a like code review tool. Cursor has
Yeah.
one too.
Yeah.
GitHub has its own tool. Maybe we need to like get that into our workflow as well.
That would help a lot. So, for example, there's this, I know this really good one at the top of mind is Code Rabbit. They do create automated pull request reviews. So you can look into that. But honestly, again, all of these are actually just, I believe, built by 20-year-olds right out of college with access to Cursor. Like that's where we're at. Like it wouldn't take you that long to write your own GitHub action that's gonna do code review for you. So like if you're into building that in-house, you could. You don't necessarily have to rely on these subscriptions for it. It's honestly we're at an insane time in tech right now. It's just gonna keep getting like more intense. Yeah, I think that's about it. And anyone else have any questions? Anything I can clarify?
No questions,
Guys,
guys?
this is your chance. Go for it, or uh, we can wrap up if you don't have any. You can always like reach out to Ehfaz as well. He's on
Yeah.
LinkedIn. He's on like all the platforms. Um,
Well, yeah. Yeah, well, this was a great session, guys. Let me know. Like, do hit me up on get my contact number from Sam if you need to. I'd be happy to help you guys with like any workflow needs or yeah.
all right. Thank you, Ehfaz, for your time. Really appreciate
Thank
it. We might get you back after like a month or two. You never know.
Yeah, sounds great. Sounds great.
Okay.
All right, cool. Awesome meeting you guys. Take care.
Okay.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Have a good
Bye.
day, everyone.
you.
Bye.
Bye.